to help you to identify skills that you already possess and to help you be able to talk about them. And then maybe to identify some skills that you want to gain. Maybe you haven't got an awful lot of knowledge about them or experience in them. So the intention in creating the sessions is to help you to be able to talk about these skills at interview. So it's not a masterclass in the topic or anything. It's to be able to help you be, answer some of the questions and talk about the particular skills involved around this topic. So the idea is I give you a framework around the topic and you match that to your own skills and to your own experience. And as I said, at the end of the session, we'll give you some examples of the sort of questions that you might get asked at interview around this topic. And certainly for resilience, it's quite a mixed bunch. It goes across quite a few different things. So use what you learned today to help you prepare your answers for questions. I always say keep your answers in one place and just continue to build on them as you gain more knowledge about the topic itself and you gain more knowledge about yourself as well and recognize some of the evidence that you can put forward for these different topics. So the topic of resilience then sits under interpersonal skills, but of course it's a transferable skill and it could sit under some of the other headings such as problem solving, teamwork, communication skills, and things like timekeeping or organizational skills as well. And of course, I always say to you, especially as I know that quite a few of you are coming to a lot of these sessions, this is all for the people who haven't heard it all before, folks. So the course structure today, then what we mean by resilience, and I have called this session active resilience. And that's because I think that, we're only resilient as long as we take action to support our resilience. So I think that it's a process and we have to be proactive about it. So it's not a case of you either are resilient or you're not. It's that there's different levels of it for all of us all of the time, and that you have to be proactive about supporting your resilience all of the time. So do you have it and do you need it? I want to give you a link to a questionnaire that you might want. I really would advise you actually to do later. I'll talk a little bit about resilience in our day-to-day lives. But of course, as this is an employability skill session, I want to relate that to your work life. So Terry will put the link to just the questionnaire. It's coming up a wee bit later, so there's no hurry with it, Terry. And I'll also then try and break down resilience to look at the different components that make it up. And then based on that, what are the sort of things that you can do to build and to support your resilience? And whilst the components are pretty much the same for everyone, how you want to go about doing that will be different for all of you. And it's really important to find out what works for you. Rather, I'm not going to say you must do this because what works for me won't necessarily work for you. So I definitely encourage you to, maybe be open to trying new things, but ultimately not everything will suit or work for everybody. And finally, then we'll talk about why employers will question you on resilience and the sort of questions that they might ask around it. And of course, you'll have the opportunity to ask myself and Terry various hard questions that I can pass to him and only he can answer for me. Okay, so resilience is a word that we hear time and time again. And sometimes when I hear it, it kind of makes me a little bit cross because it sometimes sounds like you either are resilient or you're not resilient. And, to be quite frank, that's a bit ridiculous. We're all resilient to different degrees and at different times. So we have varying levels of resilience. So this week you might feel particularly strong and resilient, and next week you might feel a bit vulnerable and fragile for lots and lots of reasons. So it is very much, from my point of view anyway, it's very much not a case of you are either resilient or you aren't resilient. So let's start on that basis that we all need to be looking at our resilience. So even those people who consider themselves to be very resilient have to work at it on a regular basis. They might not even be aware that they do that, but it doesn't come without the support system, basically. So they have to put in place support systems to help them be resilient. So I'm sure that some of you will have heard resilience described as being able to bounce back from adversity like a rubber band. But if you think about that, do you ever really come back from adversity as if things were exactly the same as before? You'll have learned things, you will have processed things, you might have changed your behaviors, you might have, you might do things differently than before. The fact is that we don't so much bounce back, but we adapt and we adjust. So I think it's far healthier to think about it in that way, because we're acknowledging that actually it did have an impact on me and it might have had a significant impact. And so, I have dealt with it and now things are the way they are, not as they were before. So rather than think of it as a rubber band, I think of it more like one of these slinkies, because we have to flex and we have to bend and we have to move on. So, it's not about going back to the way you were before. It's about, what have I learned? What do I need to, do differently to support myself? So here's a definition that I work with for resilience: the capacity to remain flexible in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when faced by a life disruption or extended periods of pressure, so that we emerge from difficulty stronger, wiser, and more able. And that is Dr. Carol Pemberton, who happens to be the person who trained me in coaching skills. Um, so look at the parts of this: thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So if we're trying to be flexible in these, then we need to make sure that we don't go down the route of negative thinking. Everything is always other people's fault. Negative feelings and behaviors might be, where we just get angry and express that anger inappropriately, take it out on other people or indeed on ourselves. So maybe not treating ourselves appropriately and positively. So again, the capacity to remain flexible in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when faced by a life disruption or extended periods of pressure. And again, those are two different things. One is a particular situation that has a big impact on you and requires your resilience to deal with it. The other is not one particular event, but a sustained level of pressure, which again requires your resilience in different ways. So think about it in terms of, going into a work situation. We might experience disruption if, for example, something that we had worked on hard suddenly gets cancelled, or the budget is pulled, or the deadline is changed, jobs perhaps lost. So those might be examples of a specific life disruption. And of course, in our home and in our personal life, there could be all sorts of life disruptions, relationships, illnesses, all sorts of things. So another aspect of work is when we have extended periods of pressure. Um, there were some headlines recently about Goldman Sachs, about their junior staff wanting to put a cap on their working hours because they were regularly doing 18-hour shifts. Now, to me, that is pretty extreme, very extreme. But most jobs will have times when you're under pressure, either because you have a lot to do, perhaps there are a fewer number of staff, maybe a big contract has come in, maybe there are time management issues, or you have a particularly demanding boss or demanding customers. So, lots and lots of reasons why there might be a specific time where you have to put extra effort in and your resilience might be under pressure, or it might be that sustained level of pressure as well. And then the definition finishes with, so that we emerge from the difficulty stronger, wiser, and more able. And that's what I mean about we don't just bounce back. We emerge at the other side with some changes made. So when you're thinking of your examples of interview answers, think about how you have adapted. what process you have taken to do this, and what you have learned from the process. And I should say here that if you were not present at my session on change and adaptability, then this session really links into that. And the recording is on the Development Week's website. So it's worth having a look at that one in conjunction with this if you haven't already seen that one. No harm in promoting myself there. So where do you get your resilience from? This is a link to a free questionnaire on resilience. I think Terry put it into the chat as well for you. I would recommend that you do the questionnaire when you have time, but the site says it can take up to half an hour to complete. Now, it certainly didn't take me anything like that. It was probably 10 minutes, but I do tend to rush through questionnaires, and not everybody does that. But there are 180 questions, so definitely worth giving yourself a bit of time to work through it. So just to be clear, it is not a questionnaire to tell you if you are resilient or not, because remember, we all have certain levels of resilience, and that is not consistent. You know, it's not always the same. So there's no point in doing something that gives you a score. What it does is gives you a report which looks at 4 different aspects of resilience, and then it breaks down your responses into these 4 components to tell you what might hinder your resilience or what might boost your resilience, so that you know what is working well for you and what you might be able to do to support your resilience. So it's very personal to you. It gives you very specific aspects to look at, and you might find that it really improves your self-awareness around this topic. And not only might you find ways to support your resilience, but it will definitely give you some things to think about around your interview answers. So again, pick out what is relevant to you and what supports your responses for, any preparation that you would be doing for interview answers. So the 4 different components of the report are confidence, and that's about feelings of competence, effectiveness in coping with stressful situations, and strong self-esteem, and the frequency of positive and negative emotions. The second one then is purposefulness, a clear sense of purpose, clear values, drive and direction. Adaptability, and this is one that employers will definitely be interested in. So flexibility and adapting to changing situations which are beyond our control. And then social support is about building good relationships with others. And remember that would be work relationships as well as personal relationships. And it's also about seeking support rather than coping on your own. And those 4 components are the different elements that make up resilience. And notice that a lot of them are around our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviours. So back to that definition again. And of course, if you don't do the online questionnaire, you can still look at these 4 aspects of resilience and just think about how you can see examples of them in your life experiences, and think about what works well for you and what maybe hinders your resilience as well. So it's not essential by any means that you do the questionnaire, but it might give you, some extra things that you can talk about, and certainly give you more knowledge about yourself. So if you do the questionnaire, you will get a report broken down into the 4 different aspects of confidence, purposefulness, adaptability, and social support. And it will give you a further breakdown of specific aspects, in each of those areas that are either things that will be helpful to you or things that hinder your resilience. It basically points out things about you that might make things more difficult for you to be resilient, or maybe helps you to support that resilience. So if you look at the short example that I've put up here, you can see that under confidence, one of the things that it looks at is how much you tend to worry about things, and depending on your answers, how much that helps your resilience or hinders it. And likewise, the examples I have here under purposefulness is around assertiveness. Adaptability is around level of frustration, and social support is degree of personal warmth. So it really breaks things down. So as well as looking at the level of those aspects, it gives you a little statement around each of those. So also great then for picking out appropriate phrases when you're forming your interview responses. So this is great for helping you look at ways of building your resilience and supporting your resilience, but it's also really good for giving you a picture of how you do things and what works for you, and consider what might not be working for you. So what are the personal characteristics that are working for you, and what are the skills that you can develop? So resilience skills can help us to adapt our natural style and our tendency. So, we have this natural style. We do things in a sort of automatic way, but building up our resilience skills can help us to adjust those or balance them if need be. So the second part of the report is specifically about the workplace, and it uses a model of workplace well-being, which identifies requirements for us to feel good at work. It's something that, a lot of companies, if they're going to introduce well-being at work, will look to this model to see what sort of things need to be introduced. So it's a well-known model. This part of the report gives you an insight into how comfortable or challenged you're likely to feel in these 6 different circumstances at work. So for example, if you look at this first one, informed and equipped, the requirement to feel that we have the information and resources necessary to do our job. Balanced workload, and the balance is between having enough work to feel stimulated, but also manageable. So it's not being too bored and not being too overstressed. Collaborative relationships, people feel that they're encouraged by their work relationships and also feel supported by them. The fourth requirement is about feeling in control and having some influence over how they do their work. If there is change, then it is positive and well managed. And finally, they have a sense of purpose and feel that their goals are clear, challenging, and achievable. So again, you get lots of information about those different aspects of work through the report that you get. But as I say, all of these, even if you don't do the report, you can still pick out the things that are relevant to you. So the report gives you a little scenario around each of these 6 aspects. And going by your responses, it tells you what might help you to be resilient in these situations. As you can see here, the likely positives and also possible areas for you to work on. Okay. And you take from it what you want, obviously. You don't have to, diligently go through each thing and change all of the different things about yourself. It's trying to pick from it what'll work for you. So I think that the report is really helpful for getting you to think about the sort of experience you've had and how you've handled them and how you might want to talk about them at interview. So for example, in situations where information or resources are limited, where you are, under significant pressures on your workload or your work-life balance, you may need to make more effort than usual to engage with other people so that you can share the load where possible. So when you get questions like, how do you like to work? How do you work under pressure? Do you like to work on your own or as part of a team? Give me an example of when you've used your initiative. This is a good resource to help you think about how you can respond to that in a strong and positive way. And obviously, you don't have to start listing all the negative things about yourself. You're just formulating your answers in a way that's going to make the interviewer think, yes, they've actually self-awareness here. They've understood that we need to be able to be resilient in order to progress in work and to deal with things as they come up. So I would say, I definitely recommend that you do the questionnaire to give you as much information as possible. But even if you don't get a chance to do it, you can use these components of resilience and situational aspects at work to help you to formulate your interview responses. So just sort of moving on, it's really important that we notice when we are low in resilience or when we begin to feel too much stress. And I'm saying too much stress because a little bit of stress is fine. It's, whenever it becomes too much. And that's maybe, could be the adrenaline before a presentation or a few nights of working late to get an assignment finished might impact on your sleep. So, how do you recognize when you're feeling stressed or even just, the difference between being stressed or excited? And you need to be aware of this in order to be able to support yourself. So, think about when you last felt most stressed. How did you feel it in your body? Was your shoulders tense? Was your stomach in knots? Did your skin become itchy or did you get a rash? Did your behaviors change? Did you maybe snap at your friends or your family? Did you maybe drink more or eat more than you normally would? Maybe you started biting your nails. Did you find yourself thinking very negatively about things, worrying more, finding it hard to make a decision about anything? Did you feel that your confidence was low or did you feel more anxious? So there are so many signs of stress in people, from behaviors to thoughts and emotions and physical symptoms. And it might not always be the same each time whenever you're stressed. You might suddenly get itchy skin that you never had before, for example. Um, but often we experience similar signs of stress, and it's important that you know what to look for within yourself so that you can begin to address it and address it early on. And because obviously, the sooner that you can spot that and begin to address it, the better. So, recognizing your own signs of stress is very important. Don't look at just what the list might be, but look at how it actually affects you. And so then, very importantly, I think this is a good point to say that I am not an expert in stress or mental health. And my angle today is very much in supporting you through interview questions around resilience. So it's important to note that there is very good support in Queen's for any of you that might be experiencing stress or wellbeing issues with the Student Wellbeing Service. And their resources are also very good. So I'm dealing today with resilience in terms of interviews as opposed to, being an expert in well-being. So I think one of the best things that you can do is to consider what are the things that are stressing you. And there's always something, and to try and balance up that with supports or protective factors. So obviously, if there are things that are stressing you, and it's obviously different at different times, um, things that you can maybe do something about, then you should probably work on trying to do something about that. So it might be that you have been procrastinating over something. Maybe it's delaying getting an assignment done. This is the wrong time of year for that, but you'll understand what I'm saying. So, maybe if it is something like that and it is causing you to be stressed, then obviously it would be a good idea to come up with a strategy and deal with the issue. So, removing stressors, if you can be very useful. But it's also worthwhile looking at those protective factors and trying to continually balance them up. So, how about popping into the chat what you like to do to either ward off stress, or if you know you're feeling stressed, how do you address it? What kind of things might you do? For example, going for a walk. So I've one person saying exercise, a park run. Yeah. Anything else? Swimming and eating. Not at the same time, I hope. Anybody doing the very popular now outdoor swimming in Northern Ireland? I see we have new blue flags because so many people are swimming in the sea now. It didn't used to be a thing here so much. Meditation, great. Take time out to rebalance, but how do you take that time out? That's what I'm asking. What specifically do you do? Listening to music, yeah, great. Do you have a specific playlist that you like to do? Naps, swimming, walking, me nights, self-care, okay, breathings. Great. Good range of stuff there. And obviously, if you're recognizing that those things are supporting you, then it's really useful. You don't wait till you get overly stressed. You keep up that, keep those protective factors balancing with the stresses that come up regularly. So let me see. Yeah. So, um, pampering myself, spa, salon, etc. Sounds expensive, but yeah, great. So some of the things that you might do to fill up your resilience reservoir or balance out your protective factors might be things that I've put up there, and you've come up with lots of them there. So go for a run or a walk, the gym, boxing, swim, play with the dog if you have one. That's a great one actually. Unconditional love, you can't beat that one. Read a book, listen to music, bake a cake, chat to a friend. I don't think that anybody actually said that getting support from other people can be a very useful one too. And it doesn't have to be a case of that I'm going to talk to you because I need a solution to this. It might just be enough to be able to talk, to get it out of your system. So chat to a friend is an important one. Play an instrument, maybe a video game, and the big one at the minute that everybody says is so important, go out in nature. So thanks for your contributions there, some really good ones. And just to divide it up further and to give you some more to think about then, what are the skills that you draw on, the supports that you have in place, the strategies that you use to help you, and maybe words of wisdom that give you comfort. So it's just a wee template there to sort of divide things up so that, you're not just looking at one type of support mechanism, but that you've got lots of different things there that, you can use to help support you. So the kind of things that I'm thinking of here, the skills that you might draw on, it might be that you are able to, for example, compartmentalize work from home so that whenever maybe you are stressed at work, but you come home and you can leave all that behind you. And being able to do that sort of compartmentalization is a skill in itself. And if it helps, then that's great. Humor can be a skill. So drawing on your sense of humor might be good in terms of your, keeping yourself feeling that you're feeling good. It might be other skills could be using good organizational or time management skills. That's certainly one that you'd like to be able to bring up at interview, to be able to say that that's something that supports your resilience. Supports then that keep you upright. You might have friends and family or a mentor or a coach for support. You might use some of the strategies that, we just mentioned, like exercising. You might have some things that give you comfort, like books or poems or even family sayings, words of wisdom that spring to mind whenever you feel that you need that little bit of extra support. What would Granny say? That kind of thing. And the last thing then that I want to talk about before I go on to the interview questions is power posing. Now, I would expect that some of you will have come across this before, but if you haven't, then it's based on research done by Professor Amy Cuddy. And she has one of the most watched TED Talks ever on this subject. And there's a link at the bottom of the slide there, but Terry also has a link that he can pop into the chat there for me too. So you can have a look at that later on. It's very interesting. I think it's about 20 minutes or so. So she basically said that our body language influences how other people think about us and behave towards us. We all know that. But she says that it also influences how we feel about ourselves and how we behave. So what she says is that if we open up our bodies and make them appear bigger in what she calls a power pose, and then we hold these power poses for 2 minutes, it basically changes, it does things to our body. So it increases our testosterone, our assertiveness hormone, and it decreases our cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So that top row of pictures are the power poses, or some of the power poses, and the bottom are the lower power poses, basically non-power poses. And why should we do it? So what Amy Cuddy says is that when we change that balance of hormones, then we feel more powerful, confident, assertive, happier. There's lots more to come here. Optimistic, creative, courageous, enthusiastic, grounded, and resilient. And we feel less anxious, less stressed, and less self-absorbed. So Professor Cuddy would recommend that before you go into your interview, or you do your presentation, or you sit your exam, you should power pose for 2 minutes beforehand. Now, it doesn't give you skills or talents that you don't have. It doesn't make you smarter or better informed. It doesn't change who you are. It allows you to be the best version of who you are. So clearly you can't go into interview and sit like any of these people. That's not going to look good. You're not going to impress anyone doing that. But when you're waiting to go into your interview, you can sit upright with your chest open and your head raised. What you don't want is to slouch or to close your body up. Okay, so I'm not saying, yeah, go and sit like those people. I am just saying, open your body up, have your head raised, keep your chest open rather than being slouched down. And here is Amy Cuddy demonstrating the Wonder Woman pose. So if you nip into the toilets maybe before your interview and you happen to see a few people standing like this, then they're all doing the Wonder Woman pose to get ready for their interviews. Now, here's the thing. I read recently that, as with a lot of popular research, people had been trying to replicate the results from the study and couldn't do it. So I genuinely don't know how valid it is. However, we can always rely on Peanuts and Charlie Brown for words of wisdom. I love this cartoon. This is my depressed stance. When you're depressed, it makes a lot of difference how you stand. The worst thing you can do is to straighten up and hold your head high, because then you'll start to feel better. If you're going to get any joy out of being depressed, you've got to stand like this. Very wise words indeed. And I think that those wise words are from about 1960, so long before Amy Cuddy's research. So folks, even if power posing does not do all those things that Amy Cuddy says it does, it will certainly make you look more confident and hopefully make you feel good as well. Okay, so I am going to leave that there before we move on to our interview questions. Does anybody have anything they'd like to raise or to ask? Happy enough? Okay. So, interview preparation. Just to remind you of the STAR technique for effectively answering your interview questions. Basically, you want to be able to tell the interviewer your story by putting your answer into context for them. So making it as simple for them as possible. So when you're formulating an answer for your interview, try and follow this STAR technique. It makes your answers clear and logical, and it means that you're getting across the main points that you need to, that you're not missing out the main points. So start by listening to the question. Think of the example that you're going to use, and hopefully you will have already prepared some great answers. But even if you're thinking on your feet, frame your answer into situation, task, action, and result. So you want to describe the event or the situation that you were in, explain the task that you had to complete, what were the sort of challenges that you had to meet, describe the specific actions that you personally took to complete the task. And as I'm always saying, you can say what you did as in the team, what the team did, but you should also say what you personally did. Finish with the results. What were the results of your actions? Were there benefits? Were there savings? Were there, cost cuttings? What was the impact? So employers want people who can deal with pressure at work and stay strong in the face of difficult situations. So keeping calm, being focused and poised is a plus for employers in, every employment sector. And it's important that you can demonstrate strength of character at work and composure whenever there's adversity at work. So before you answer, think about what resilience would mean for your potential employer. Resilience is important in, so many roles. So think of good examples which demonstrate how you applied this quality. The best answers, as I said, tell a story and show your resilience in as a positive quality. But it's the process that we go through to make us resilient that's interesting. So think about your situations, whether it's particular one-off situations or whether it's that long series of pressure building. How did you deal with that? What sort of things did you put in place to help with that? That's the sort of thing that you can be telling employers. And obviously, if you think about it now, then you get your best answers ready. So the sort of questions then that can come up at interview around this. And some of these questions are ones that you want to have a prepared answer for, just so that you don't blurt out the first embarrassing thing that comes to you. Because whenever you're talking about resilience and dealing with difficult situations, it can often be really, really personal. So you come out with things that you maybe think, oh, I kind of wish I hadn't talked about that at interview. So have your things prepared instead so that you're not being taken unawares. So questions then, describe a situation where things deteriorated quickly. How did you react to recover from that situation? Tell us about a project where you achieved success despite the odds being stacked against you. Give us an example of a situation where you worked under pressure, and that one will come up regularly. Under what conditions do you work best and worst? Which recent project or situation has caused you the most stress? How did you deal with it? And you want to be able to talk about the skills there that were involved in it. So that little template, about your time management skills, about your support, you don't have to get terribly personal or anything. You decide what you are happy to, talk about at interview. But that's why I encourage you to do it prior to interview rather than to come up with things in the session. You don't necessarily want to say, oh yeah, I drank a lot more than I normally would. That's how I got myself through it. You want to do it in a really positive way. So a good example of a question that you might like to have an answer prepared for, just so that you don't blurt out the first embarrassing thing that comes to you. When is the last time that you were upset with yourself? It's very personal. So you could come out with anything for that. So do think through the sort of things that you might be willing to talk about. And let's hope you don't get asked anything just as personal as that. If I hadn't prepared an answer for something like that question, I would come out with absolutely anything and, probably regret then talking to an employer about it. So yeah, have things prepared. Another question, what makes you frustrated or impatient at work? And do remember to be positive there. Talk about, resources or something like that. Don't talk about particular people. So remember, put your answer into the STAR framework, position your response in a positive way, even if the change was not entirely successful or if it was uncomfortable for you. Try and put something together that's positive there. So now's the time for questions. And remember, you've got myself, you've got Terry. We will do our best to answer anything that might be of interest to you. Terry, you might want to stop recording just so that we could answer questions privately.